Third phase of moon.
We are back. Third Phase of Moon Radio Live. I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Elias, and we're about to take you for an amazing ride. Back by popular demand, we have Ron Gardner. Now, to Ron Gardner. Ron, you have been a subject of some amazing debate for listeners of Third Phase of the Moon and the viewers of Third Phase of the Moon because you've brought out some extremely controversial material that everybody seems to be fascinated about. Ron Gardner, for all you out there, he runs an awesome site. It's area51jrod.com. Once again, area51jrod.com. Ron,
it's all lowercase. So people know.
If you can tell everybody what is on your site briefly before we jump into some of these great questions. And I know Johnny's got some too about the J-Rod, Area 51, and all these things.
Yeah, I'm glad to be with you guys this evening. I've enjoyed every minute that we've been together. On my site, if you look at the top left-hand corner, I say this is the official sanctioned site, internet site for disclosure. Now, why do I say that? I say that because I've been in touch with members of Majestic 12, which is the group that controls the whole UFO ET phenomena, the information about it on planet Earth. And two of those members, I named one of them. I'm going to name another one tonight. I've never named it before, but I'll name another one. But one of the members is Admiral J. Michael McConnell. And McConnell is head of MJ-12. And when I began in 2003, 4, 5, interviewing people that worked at Area 51, S4, McConnell sent me a letter and sent a special messenger from Las Vegas over to my apartment in Huntington Beach, and picking up my master videos because I wasn't getting the word out quickly enough because I didn't have the funds, and it's very expensive to do editing. It's between $85 and $150 an hour. So that told me right there that the head of Majestic wanted this information out. Now, the reason that they want it out is because the main person on my site right now, I'm going to add another one, we can talk about it later in the interview, is Dr. Dan Burrish. His given name at birth is Crane. So he told me that when he was brought into the Majestic 12 organization, he called for a vote in April of 05 for to see if the group would sanction disclosure of this subject. And the vote then was 6-5 for disclosure. Now, sometimes, most of the time, there's one abstention that has to do with Masonic protocols and so forth, and also to prevent a tie. Then, in September of 05, another vote was taken, also encouraged by Dr. Dan Burrish. He was number 9 in Majestic. And that time, the vote was 8-3 for disclosure. So I know as of 2005 that the organization that controls this for over 60 years has authorized, that's why I say it's sanctioned by the secret government. That's basically the secret government. I know who all 12 members are. A little later on, I'll name a second one. I have it on my site. So you need to search my site, and I have a lot of information. Some people call it Encyclopedia Galactica, which I respect that way of presenting it because I'm basically a teacher. I want to be able to teach people about the subject.
You've been involved with this, and you are having this disclosure website because you are listing stuff that other people don't. You know, listing names of the MJ-12. The Majestic 12 was started, for those of you who don't know, in 1947 following the crash of Roswell, which, by the way, was not the first crash and retrieval. It was just the first one that was accidentally admitted by the military before the higher authorities can go back and retract that story. But Ron, real quick, just tell the listeners and the viewers out there, what got you on this journey, and what are your conclusions about it before we get into some burning questions about the details of the J-Rod again and the Area 51 that we were talking
Well,
about?
what really got me started when I was a teenager, I had a neighbor who was interested in UFO and paranormal, and she gave me a book by George Adamski called Flying Saucers Have Landed. So at that point, in my teenagers, that was my first introduction to the subject. And then in 1983, I was working for a mortgage company in Beverly Hills, and I went to lunch with the woman who was manager of the mortgage company, and I mentioned to her that I was interested in UFOs, and she said, well, my brother works at Area 51. I said, really? I got to talk to this guy. And she said, well, I can set up a meeting. So this was in 83. And I talked to him on the phone, and every time I would set up a meeting to go and film him or audio tape him, he said there would be a van cruising his neighborhood with a dish on top. So he was afraid that he was being monitored, which I'm sure that he was. So I never actually got to see him in person. I talked to him on the phone, but his story was that he was rather a low-level person, Area 51. He was a welder or something, and he was walking down the hall one day, and there's this one room that had a being in there that the room was disheveled. There was books on the floor, and the being had one blue sock and one brown sock. And he went in there and said, why don't you clean up your act? And then this being said to this fellow, look, buddy, I just put on this body every day like you put on your coveralls, so get out of here and don't bother me. Well, that, of course, got my attention. That was in 83. Then in 89, I was in Las Vegas. I spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. I've got good friends there from Europe. And Bob Lazar came on the TV on channel CBS with George Knapp, and he was in shadow at that point. And but then later on, he named who he was. So that was my first, of actual, seeing someone, especially in the media, that actually worked at Area 51. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy about Bob Lazar, but I've checked him out. I've met him. I know John Lear. I've interviewed John Lear for tens of hours. And the Bob Lazar story is real. All the people out there need to just accept that. So then time moved on. I was at a UFO conference in Las Vegas again in 93, 94. And I met Bill Uhouse. Now, Bill Uhouse is very interesting. He was a fighter pilot in World War II in the Marines. After he got out of the service, he went to work for a civilian contractor around the Chicago area. And they recruited him to work at Area 51 and S4 because he was really good at avionics design. And he actually designed a simulator to teach our pilots how to fly the UFOs. And I have a whole video about him. I know him and his son. And so that was in 93, 94. Then in 96, 97 time frame, I met who we'll talk more about at the end of this interview, is a person that we call Anonymous. Have you seen the citizens' hearings on disclosure?
Absolutely, and we were following that. Third Phase of the Moon did some live breaking news covering it up with that. We spoke to Dr. Greer from there. We spoke to Dr. Lear from there. We spoke to Stephen Bassett from there. And, of course,
great.
We wanted to know what's your role in that, the citizens'
hearing. Well, if you remember that on the Friday, the May the 3rd Friday, they had the witness for 15 minutes called Anonymous. Well, that's the person that I had been vetting for 15 years. I organized that video with Just Cause Productions, and when Bassett was talking to me about 6 months ago about the citizens' hearings, he was asking me who I could bring to the table. Well, I gave him 12 different names. Well, the only one that made the cut was Anonymous, which is fine, because that was the best one I could provide at the time. So I'm the one, and I got no acknowledgement from them that I was the one that brought him to to the general public. So Anonymous wants to stay anonymous. He was a former CIA agent. He was recruited from the Army as a cryptographer. I have all the documentation. I have pictures of him in uniform and all that. And that is the big story that's going to be hailed from here to the far reaches of the planet, that this person actually went to Area 51. He saw a J-Rod type person along with his CIA boss, and it was in a closed room with like a one-way mirror. And Anonymous was about 21, 22 years old. He's very religious. He still is. He quotes scripture all the time. And he was afraid to go into the room. The other three agents, his CIA agents, went into the room, but he didn't go in there. He thought it was a demon or something. So he just watched it through the one-way mirror. And his boss, the CIA chief, interviewed this being along with the other CIA people, and the being communicated to each of the four people in the room through mental telepathy. And they weren't certain whether he was being speaking to them, through their auditory or system, or whether it's telepathy. So one of the agents stuck his fingers in his ears, and he realized that the being, that from extraterrestrial being, I call him J-Rod, was in the room. That was the first J-Rod that I've come across, and this was in 1958. So afterwards, Anonymous asked his CIA boss to ask the alien if he was a demon. And the alien got all incensed. I'm not a demon. What's about you crazy humans? I love that little part of the story. So Anonymous is a real person. He's on his deathbed. I talked to him about a week ago. And but the only reason he came forward was that at the end of his life, he wanted to make this story known, and it's out there all over the internet, the 15 minutes. Well, I have several hours. I have hours of him, and I'm planning to do a documentary along with Just Cause Productions or separately, depending on how things work out. But this is a major story. It's breaking news. It's going to be a phenomenal story as we go forward.
Ron, this is Preston Dennett. It's an honor to speak with you again.
Yeah, hello, Preston. Good to speak with you again, sir.
So I have a question regarding, Anonymous and people like him. Years ago, I interviewed a gentleman who told me that he worked for the secret government. Actually, he didn't tell me directly. He refused to speak with me, and I interviewed him through an intermediary. And he explained to me that he had to lie to his family, his friends, everyone he knew. And he told me that he actually worked in a secret base in Alaska where they researched three various subjects, including biological weapons, sensing devices, which allowed people to look through solid objects like walls and roofs, and also electromagnetic engines. And he said it was a horrible experience. Working with them, he had to have sodium pentothal, lie detector interviews once a week. He was followed everywhere. He eventually got out, and he's still being followed. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it's like for people to work at Area 51, and how you were able to convince Anonymous to go public when there's such pressure.
Yeah, well, he had signed two different security oaths. The second one was up in 50 years, which is 2010. I've been working with him and his family since 97, 98, and I introduced him to Linda Moulton Howe. If you remember at the citizens' hearings, she explained that she went to his home and lived with him and with Anonymous and his wife for 3 days and taped him like a 91-minute audio tapes. And she saw the documentation, the same thing that I have. And the reason that I did that, exactly what you're just talking about, Dennis, Preston, is because I wanted some cover for Anonymous and myself. And by Linda interviewing him, and then she played some of the interview on Coast to Coast with Art Bell. I don't know if it's still in the archives of Coast to Coast or not. It was, I think, June the 6th of 98. course, I recorded it when it was on the air because I'm the one that set it all up. So as a result of that, that gave us some cover because the black ops don't want to start shaking the tree if too many people know about it. So all the coast-to-coast audience back then knew about it. So that gave me some measure of confidence. Anonymous had been threatened, both him and his family, and I take great responsibility in that. Other researchers think that that's a thing of the past. Well, you know what happened to Michael Hastings like 2 weeks ago, right?
No.
The Michael Hastings story? Well, you need to Google Michael Hastings and find out. His car was on a freeway. I think it was someplace here in California. I'm not sure where it was, but a bomb blew it up and blew it up into a tree.
Why don't you tell our listeners real quick who he was and why he's such an important person that was a target?
Well,
was he
I don't.
a media reporter?
Go ahead.
I was asking, was this gentleman, I'm from England, but I do catch American news, and I wondered, was that an American reporter that was sort of speaking up? And last year he had spoke up about a general, and the general actually got removed from office.
Yeah, that's the guy. That's what we're talking about. And he was a former military guy, and his wife has said they've interviewed his wife, and she's going to carry on. She's furious that they took her husband out. And so when people say this doesn't happen, it just happened 2 weeks ago, folks, because he was going public with all these things. This is really serious. And, there's a lot of fun made of UFO subjects and the people and abductions, and, they make jokes about it. But I take it very seriously. When you're up close and personal, I've had my car broken into 3 times. My apartment was entered. But when I told Dr. Dan Burrish Crane that I was being harassed, he gave the order to Majestic in 05 to stand down as far as Ron Garner is concerned. So I haven't had any problems since 05. But up to that point, I did have problems. And
I also heard, Ron.
Say again?
Sorry to interrupt you again. I just recalled something as well. I saw a thing that Mercedes had mentioned that this car exploding was not a problem from Mercedes, that this was something else that had caused this explosion and was not down to their actual vehicle. And this came about from Princess Diana that died in a Mercedes under the Pont d'Alma tunnel. And there was a vigorous investigation into that vehicle. And they were quick now to come back and say the vehicle in no way could have had an explosion like it did due to just the natural parts of the car. But anyway, back to you, Ron. Sorry. Yeah, no, that's true. And because of the Internet, this is just my take on it, we're ahead of the curve. They can't, the black ops, we could go on coast to coast. We could come on third phase of the moon and we could start talking about this information, and they can't get to us fast enough. Sometimes, like Michael Hastings, he got too far ahead of the curve. That's why I'm a little careful in some of the things that I say, because they want this in time-release capsule form. They want people to become acclimatized to the subject, which all these programs, and every day, practically, there's some kind of a UFO ET program on the internet all the time with you guys, but on mainstream TV, every time they want to boost the ratings, they put a UFO subject out.
Well, this is probably a powerful weapon on the side of people who want to disclose. If the secret government is not willing to protest, people who are speaking out, because it draws attention to the whole subject. Well,
that's right.
Well, then
that's why this whole thing with Assange and Edward Snowden, I've been following that very, very closely, because supposedly WikiLeaks has some documents about UFOs that they have never released. And I'd like to go into that in more detail. Do you guys have time before the break?
Oh, yeah. And what Snowden is one of the big things that we would love to talk about, because WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have released some UFO material, and we are eagerly awaiting to see when are they going to release the rest. But go ahead. Yeah. We got a few minutes.
Well, on my site, I consider my site sort of the WikiLeaks of UFOs, because I'm putting out information that very few people have ever known about. I have a lot more I can put out there, but I need to. I want to get a little, plug for my videos. People need to purchase the videos so that I can release more information. That's my main source of income, is selling those videos in the video store. So, but we'll go back to Snowden now. I haven't heard today. Have you heard anything? Where is he still in Moscow, as far as you know?
I did hear that he was made official requests to, I think, Ecuador and Bolivia, and was granted. Now, the question is, are they going to issue him a passport to come? That's the next step. I still think he's in Moscow, but he did choose the countries now where to ask for asylum.
Okay, well, I want to tell you a really great story here, and I hope this will be broadcast and people will pick up on it, and we'll get to Snowden, and it will get to Assange and everything. I have a documentary. A friend of mine from Ecuador. I was in Ecuador 6 years ago, researching some other UFO information. But in 2005, the president of Ecuador, I've forgotten his name, Cordero or something like that, a Spanish name. And there was this UFO researcher in Ecuador by the name of Rodriguez, and he kept after the president to release the information that Ecuador had. I have this all on document. Everything I'm saying right now, I have testimony from everybody. So the president said, all right, Rodriguez, I'll issue a presidential order to release all the UFO information. So he did that. Then 2 weeks later, Rodriguez comes back and says, Mr. Presidente, your military people have not released the information. And the president says, what? So he goes over to the military base and he finds out that his whole intelligence organization had been infiltrated by the CIA. So he literally kicked the CIA out of Ecuador in 2005. It's all over headlines. I have some good friends that live in Ecuador, and it was a big deal. You never heard about it here. And so the Assange being in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and then when he goes to Ecuador, in fact, some of those pilots, Ecuadorian pilots, were some of the pilots that I wanted to bring to the citizens' hearings. I told Stephen Bassett about that at PRG, but it was too hard to bring them from South America and get everything, the protocols. But those pilots have gun camera footage, and they chase the UFOs all over Ecuadorian skies. And the president, he fired some of the generals, and he literally kicked the CIA out of Ecuador.
Real quick, I just want to give a shout out to the Cousins brothers, who are working real hard to get all the footage out there, because if it wasn't for you, the public, we would not be having the footage shown to the world. And the mainstream media is not doing their job. And Third Phase of Moon could be said to be the WikiLeaks of UFOs, because we are showing the world's footage to the world. And it's hitting 94,000 subscribers, and Blake said he's going to get this information out to everyone. If you've captured anything amazing, make sure you find the Cousins brothers at Third Phase of Moon via Skype or Facebook. Now, real quick, what's new on Third Phase of Moon is an amazing full-length feature documentary, Alien Abduction Diaries. Also, some great panel that we had is also posted about that. And real quick is also Meteor Crash. We'd love to get your comments on that. And two great footage videos from Portland, Oregon, another one from Cincinnati, Ohio, all recently posted to Third Phase of Moon. Now, can you tell the listeners out there what other bases house aliens right now that are working side by side with humans?
The only one I know for sure is Area 51 S4. And S4 is about 15 miles southwest of Groom Lake proper. That's where all the secret stuff is, the 9 UFOs, the actual crash vehicle from Roswell that was there. Anonymous said that it wasn't so much disc shape, it was more like a spade shovel. It was rounded on the front and sort of square on the back. And Dan Burrish has seen it there. And the other place is Los Alamos, of course. That's one of the main places where I think there are ET people there right now. That's where Bill Uhouse worked with the ET engineers, and the ET engineers were helping us actually build flying discs and anti-gravity. They were teaching our engineers how to do it. Now, I think there's some at Brookhaven, but only two I know for sure is Area 51 S4 and Los Alamos. But Brookhaven, Dugway Proving Grounds, there's some possibilities there. Then there's another facility up in the Bay Area, too, where they're taking actual ET hardware and back engineering. It's a whole commercial concern up there. Linda Howe did a whole expose about it. And,
what about Bentwaters, England? I believe Larry Warren said that he had an experience where ETs were working with the military at Bentwaters in Rendlesham, England. Yeah,
I'm not sure that he said they were working with them. I hadn't heard that. That could be. But that brings up a very important subject, and it was really featured in the citizens' hearings, which is that the ET people, the thing they're most concerned about is our atomic weapons. And at Bentwaters, that was our main storage area for our tactical nukes. And, of course, nobody knew that they were there, and they sent a beam down in there to affect the nukes. And the same thing in Malmstrom Air Force Base. 21 missiles went offline. And so if you just extrapolate from those stories, the ET people are very concerned that the crazy humans are going to blow up the world.
Right. I can add to that with encounter over New York. The Indian Head nuclear power plant had a huge UFO encounter, and the ETs actually pointed out one of the silos or one of the parts of this installation which had some major problems with decay. So, I think you're right. They're very concerned, and that's definitely echoed by what the abductees are hearing from these ETs. That's the number one message they're giving to people. So
no, that's right. And the ET people, and it gets a little arcane, but I'll try to explain it briefly, is that what Dan Burry said about the J-Rod, he was a future human. He was from 50-some thousand years in the future. Now, that number just drives people crazy. They can't, fathom that. But in the other realms, go ahead.
With you saying that about the J-Rod, I thought J-Rod was from Rita Zectili, and so he was like almost a sort of reptilian type, alien.
No, not at all. No, he was from Zeta Reticuli, and he landed near Kingman, Arizona in 1953, and there were either 3 or 4 on board, and but 2 or 3 of them were taken to Los Alamos. But the J-Rod that Dr. Dan Burry's crane worked with was taken to Area 51S4. So that's why I tell people over and over, researchers, target your Freedom of Information request to Area 51S4. That's where all the craft are. That's where the bodies are, both dead and alive. That's where they have tissue samples. They have blood samples. They have X-rays. They have audio. They have thousands of hours of film and video of these beings there. And, I have 3D drawings, which I will put on my website a little later on, of the 5 different levels. And the bottom level is called the Ambassadorial Suite. And they call the J-Rod the Ambassador. Well, if they call him the Ambassador, that means there must be an Ambassadorial Suite, sort of a quasi-suite there.
Oh,
and then,
you know what?
Then Anonymous said that Eisenhower was going to invade Area 51 in 1958, and he was going to confiscate whatever classified information was there. He was going to send the First Army from Colorado to go take over the base, unless the Black Ops people, the Majestic 12 people, filled him in on what the Black Ops people and Black projects that were there. Now, it's very significant that Eisenhower made that closing speech in his presidency, the military-industrial complex. From my point of view, that's what he was talking about. This military-industrial complex, which has a lot of German and Nazi influence. I haven't revealed this before, but I'll reveal it to you now. Anonymous said that at Area 51S4 in 1958, there are either 5 or 6 German-made craft. Now, in 1958, if there were German-made craft, there must be German scientists. And
would they be like a Hannibal craft? The
Hannibal and the Vril craft and the Black Sun, all of those organizations we brought over were the paperclip people. And Bormann, who actually took over from Hitler, there's a whole book about Bormann, and he organized before World War II ever started. He started organizing all of these corporations from Germany and other parts of Europe into South America. So when Hitler realized that he was not going to win the war, he had a backup plan with Bormann, which was to go to South America and Antarctica and the Admiral Byrd's expedition called Operation High Jump. That's a whole other story, which we can get into later on. So
these Germans have put down their Nazi uniforms and put on, nice suits for banking and taken all this.
That's right.
Money.
Werner von Braun, we say he was the father of American rocketry. Well, and Peter Levenda, in his book Unholy Alliance, and his other new book, I forgot the name of it, said that von Braun and Oberth and these German scientists at first was sabotaging our space program. We had one of the White Sands rockets hit outside of across from El Paso there, and we actually put a missile and right outside of in Mexico there, and then when the Russians came up with Sputnik, our guys finally realized that those Germans were sabotaging the program because they were sharing information with the people from East Germany that went to Russia. They had, gold American Express cards. They were traveling all over. They had secret meetings. Peter Levenda says all of this in the Amsterdam presentation 2 years ago. Just Google. I love Google because I can say something and you can check it out. Peter Levenda, Amsterdam, 2 years ago. He explains all this. And the German high command, the military may have surrendered to the Allies, but Anonymous says that, and this is a blockbuster statement, that the Allies won the low-tech war, they lost the high-tech war. Because, Anonymous explains how the British intelligence knew that the Nazis had, there's a crash saucer in 1936 in the Black Forest. So they had craft that they could back engineer. Plus these mediums, the drill mediums, were actually channeling information from other star systems, and they were telling the Germans how to build UFOs and anti-gravity. Hitler was concerned about his oil reserves. He didn't have many oil reserves, and we were bombing his air bases all the time. So having a craft that can take off vertically was an important thing. And when he talks about his wonder weapons, it wasn't the V-2 rockets. Everybody assumed that. In my humble, informed opinion, it was the craft that were taken aboard the German submarines. There's big cargo submarines. 100 of them were never accounted for after the war. Where did they go? On YouTube, there's a Russian documentary. It's wonderful. I had a Russian translate some parts of it, where they shadowed the Nazi submarines when they left Norway to go to South America and Argentina. And the Russian admiral tells the whole story, that they followed them. And the German submarines were very sophisticated. They had these snorkels that they could stay underwater the full way and be able to breathe. They went by New York. There's other stories where they actually went into New York Harbor, and they could have bombed or done major damage then. But this whole story of Peter Levenda, they need to pay attention to it.
Ron, I have a question for you, which is related but a little bit different. I don't know if you've heard of Project Serpo. There's a story going around where supposedly a group of Air Force officers trained to go to another planet. And
right.
Can you comment on that? There was a book recently released, and there's a website up about this.
Yeah, I have the book sitting right here now. It's by Lynn Kasten,
right.
Kasten. And at first I was pretty skeptical of the Serpo thing, but the more I've studied it, the more I think that there's some actual, that this is actually going on. And in this book, do you have his new book?
Yeah, I found it actually really, same as you. I was like skeptical at first, but as I read it and thought about it, I'm like, well, this is pretty convincing.
Well, he does a beautiful thing with he takes the Steven Spielberg movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It opens up with these astronauts, and going aboard the ship. And so my information, inside information, Spielberg has a lot of information, inside information about this, because the Black Ops want this out into films, and Spielberg's one of the main people to do it.
Right. Well, it's such a treat talking to you. You're confirming a lot of these details that I've heard piecemeal from other people. And one in particular regards Area 51. Guy who said he was an insider said that it is 5 stories underground, which you confirmed. And he said the bottom level is inhabited solely by ETs, and they're the ones who are actually in control of the whole situation. I'm wondering if you could comment on that. Who is in control? Is it the military, the secret government, or is it the ETs who are running Area 51?
Well, it's the secret government, and the ETs have influence over them because their mind, Dr. Dan Burridge Crane's IQ is about 200, and he said that J-Rod was, probably 5 or 6 times more intelligent than he was, because when the J-Rod conveyed information to him, it was in like holographic form with geometric images and numbers and everything. So you can imagine these beings working with our scientists. That brings up another interesting issue. I've had this told to me by various, in-depth researchers, that one of the things that the ET people are unhappy about is the scientists that they work with are not first rate. Dr. Dan Burridge Crane, microbiologist, was. But so many of them are not first rate. They're second and third rate because a first rate scientist is not going to work in a facility where you have armed men on every corner and everything you watch, everything you do is watched. Like you mentioned before, you have to have, lie detector tests and constantly monitored. So the ET people are working with second and third rate scientists, and they want to work with the top people, which when disclosure comes, then we can set that straight. And there's a facility, like I mentioned, up in the Bay Area where that is sort of happening right now. They have ET technology, and they're putting that out to industry, and it has a lot to do with the drone warfare. I don't want to go into it too much because Linda Howe's done a great job about that. She gave a lecture to MUFON 2 years ago about that. So, no, there's a strong influence. They influence the financial situation, too, of the world. And it's hard for people to get that. But with all of these NSA revelations by Snowden that they're monitoring everything, then they must know what's going on in the ET world, and the ET people can read the minds of all these people so they know what's going on. And, I just love the fact that Assange and Bradley Manning and all this, they're young guys, and they don't have the esprit de corps of the old gentleman in the military. I love Edgar Mitchell, but he won't name names. I've said to him, Edgar, just name some names. But the old school won't do it. And I'll name a name. I did at the beginning of this, Admiral McConnell. Just go ask him if he knows about Area 51. He has his own one-bedroom apartment. There's 12 of them at Area 51 on, I think it's level 3 or 4. And they have sunken living room. I have all the diagrams of them. And the other one I mentioned on my site is Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, there's 2 of the current members of MJ-12. If you don't believe me, go ask them.
Now, Ron, one of the things that generated some amazing talk last time was about the Battle of Area 51. Was it President, which president? It was the one with President Eisenhower was not allowed access, and he was threatening to actually go in with army tanks?
That's right. He was going to get the First Army from Colorado and invade Area 51 in 1958.
Oh, I wish he had done it, sort of.
I wish he had.
Isn't that what the battle was over on the West Coast, where you see all those searchlights that were all firing thousands of rounds and hitting nothing?
I know.
To that?
Yeah, no, I know.
No, that was the Battle of Los Angeles. That was
that was in 41, I think, or 42. Yeah, 42.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole interesting story in itself. But I think, what was it, Independence Day, where they had all of the the RVs and the motorcycles and everybody and they coming into Area 51. I love that scene because, you know, the Wackanut people and the guards, they could handle a few thousand, but if millions of people decided to go to Area 51, you know, and, you know, it's impossible to organize that, but I'm just saying some movie makers out there listening to this, they might think about using that theme, is to pry open that Area 51 S4. Now, there's a lot of information about Area 51. The woman, I've forgotten her name right now, that wrote the book about Area 51. I had meetings with her when she was writing the book, and I tried to give her information about what I knew about S4, and she wouldn't hear it. And she talked to all of the scientists and the flyboys that they have an oral history of Area 51 proper at the atomic facility there, the museum in Las Vegas. So, and they weren't getting that many people coming to the museum until her book came out. So they have a section on Area 51 and ETs in the museum in Las Vegas right now. So they're starting to get some more traffic of people. And the woman's book, I wish I could think of her name right now, but she is 500 and some odd pages, and the last 7 pages were about Roswell. And it was a crazy idea that the Russians sent these disc-shaped craft with these creatures that were created, you know, in the test tube and all that. And she put that in there, and that's where she got all the play, because the last 7 pages, forget the other 500 and some on. So that shows you the public wants to know this information. It's in a subliminal basis. You know, that the population, well, with all the programs and all the abductions, and people have a vague memory of being in another star system, another part of their psyche was born someplace else. That's my take on it anyway. That's my personal opinion. That we're all from a different star system. And one of my favorite movies of all time is Contact. And we talked about this, I think, on the last program, was that Carl Sagan was a paid disinformation specialist. I know that from several different sources. But he had sort of a turning of the mind in his last years of his life, and he wrote the book Contact. If you remember, one of the main themes of the story Contact was when Jodie Foster went through that Stargate, who did she meet? She met her father. So these themes of Stargates and Serpo, they all dovetail together. You can start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And I encourage your listeners out there and your viewers to pay attention. You guys are doing a great job. Kudos to what you're doing, and I'm trying to help as much as I can.
Now, I actually have another question. You're releasing an enormous amount of information. So, boy, it's really amazing what you're doing, and really, really important. And I'm wondering, is there some information that right now is just too sensitive to release that you're sitting on, and then maybe we'll release in the future, or are you letting it all hang out? Everything you learn?
No. I'm holding back certain things, mainly because the general public and even the UFO researchers. I've given a few talks. I haven't talked very much, but in the past, and their paradigm is still lights in the sky. I mean, you guys are asking for people to send in videos of lights in the sky. Well, I passed lights in the sky 20 years ago. I want to find out who's driving those lights in the sky. You know, that's my focus. You know, who are the pilots? What are they doing? You know, what's that all about? And that's why I focused on Area 51 S4, because that's where Bill Uhouse was training the pilots to fly extraterrestrial craft. And Bob Lazar
how many crashed UFOs or reverse engineered UFOs do you think we have?
Well, Bill Uhouse said there's about 3 or 4 dozen. That was his estimate, but this was back in the mid-90s. He passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. But his son, Will Uhouse, got a special package from his father, which I don't know what was in it, but there was some key information in there which will be revealed later on, and I'm not ready to go there yet. Yeah, but there's a lot of information. I mean, this is the greatest secret in the history of the world. There's so many layers, all of the researchers, and it's very difficult